The cold Wyoming wind whistled through the cracks of the barn's wooden walls as Bethany Fletcher struggled to keep her balance on the rickety ladder. April 1878 had brought unusually severe storms to Sweetwater County, and at 23 years old, she was no stranger to the harsh realities of frontier life. But tonight, as thunder cracked overhead and the structure groaned ominously, she wondered if she'd made a terrible mistake in seeking shelter here. Just a bit higher, she muttered to herself, reaching for the lantern hanging from a beam. Her traveling companions had abandoned her hours ago, taking the wagon and horses when they realized a storm was brewing. Supposed friends, they'd proven themselves cowards in the face of nature's fury. The ladder wobbled beneath her boots. Rain hammered against the roof with increasing intensity, drowning out her startled cry as the first support beam splintered. The sound that followed a terrible groan of wood giving way would haunt Bethany for years to come. She tumbled backward as the barn began to collapse around her. A searing pain shot through her leg when a beam crashed down, pinning her to the hay-strewn floor. Dust and debris filled her lungs as she desperately tried to call for help, knowing her voice couldn't possibly carry above the storm's rage. The last thing she remembered was the crushing weight pressing against her chest and the absolute certainty that she would die alone in this forgotten corner of Wyoming territory. Consciousness returned in hazy fragments. Pain radiated from her trapped leg, and the suffocating darkness pressed in from all sides. How long had she been here? Hours? Days? Bethany tried to move, but found herself thoroughly pinned beneath the collapsed structure. "Help!" she called, her voice barely more than a rasp. "Please, somebody help me!" Only silence answered. Tears streamed down her dirt-streaked face. After surviving 4 years on her own since her parents' death, after traveling across half the country seeking a better life, was this truly how her story would end? The sound came so faintly at first that Bethany thought she'd imagined it, the distant whinny of a horse, followed by the crunch of boots on gravel. "Hello?" a man's voice called from somewhere outside. "Anybody in there?" "Here!" she cried, summoning every ounce of strength. "I'm trapped under the beams!" The sounds of frantic movement followed, wood scraping against wood, grunts of exertion, and finally, a sliver of daylight penetrated her wooden prison. "Madam?" The voice was closer now, deep and steady. "Keep talking so I can find you." "I'm here," Bethany called, coughing as dust filled her lungs. "My leg is trapped. I can't move." More beams shifted, and suddenly the weight on her chest lessened as someone lifted a large section of roof away from her. Sunlight flooded in, momentarily blinding her. When her vision cleared, she found herself looking up into the most striking blue eyes she'd ever seen. The man was tall and broad-shouldered, with a weathered face that spoke of years under the harsh western sun. His dark hair was streaked with dust and sweat, and concern etched deep lines around his eyes. "Don't move," he instructed, kneeling beside her. "Name's Ryan Porter. I'm going to get you out of here." "Bethany Fletcher," she managed, wincing as he assessed the debris pinning her leg. Ryan worked methodically, removing smaller pieces of wood before addressing the main beam across her leg. "This is going to hurt," he warned, positioning himself to lift. "Ready?" She nodded, biting her lip as he counted to 3 and heaved the massive beam aside. The pain was excruciating, forcing a scream from her throat before darkness threatened to claim her again. "Stay with me, Miss Fletcher," Ryan urged, his voice anchoring her to consciousness. He examined her leg with gentle hands. "Not broken, I don't think, but badly bruised." "You're lucky." "Lucky?" she whispered incredulously. A ghost of a smile crossed his face. "You're alive. In my experience, that counts for something." With careful movements, he helped her sit up, supporting her back with a strong arm. "What happened? This barn's been standing for 15 years at least." "Storm," Bethany explained, accepting the canteen he offered. "I was seeking shelter when it began to collapse. My traveling companions." She trailed off, the betrayal still fresh. Ryan's expression darkened. "They left you?" She nodded, not trusting her voice. "People can be worse than wolves sometimes," he said quietly. His eyes met hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. "I'll never leave you like that, Miss Fletcher. You have my word." Something in his voice, its quiet certainty, made Bethany believe him, though they'd only just met. Perhaps it was desperation, or perhaps it was the way he gently brushed debris from her hair with a tenderness that belied his rough exterior. "Can you stand?" he asked. With his help, Bethany attempted to put weight on her injured leg, only to crumple against him with a gasp of pain. "That settles it," Ryan said, scooping her into his arms as if she weighed nothing. "My ranch is about 3 miles east. You'll rest there until you're healed." "I couldn't impose," she began. "It's not an imposition," he interrupted firmly. "It's what decent folks do." As he carried her from the ruins of the barn into the clear Wyoming afternoon, Bethany couldn't help but notice how the sunlight caught in his dark hair, highlighting threads of copper she hadn't seen in the dimness of the collapsed structure. His jaw was set with determination, and despite her pain and exhaustion, she felt safer than she had in years. Ryan's horse, a magnificent chestnut stallion, stood patiently nearby. With impressive care, he settled Bethany in the saddle before mounting behind her, one strong arm securely around her waist. "Rest if you can," he murmured, his breath warm against her ear. "I've got you." Bethany allowed herself to lean back against his solid chest, her eyes drifting shut as the horse began a gentle walk eastward. Though her leg throbbed and her future remained uncertain, for the first time since her parents' passing, she didn't feel alone. True to Ryan's word, they reached his ranch as the sun began its descent toward the western horizon. Unlike the sprawling cattle operations she'd seen in her travels, this was a modest homestead, a solid 2-story house with a wide porch, flanked by a small barn and corral. A wisp of smoke curled from the stone chimney, and the windows glowed with welcoming lamplight. "My foreman must have lit the lamps," Ryan explained, dismounting before carefully helping her down. "I've been gone since yesterday, checking fence lines after the storm." "It's lovely," Bethany said sincerely, leaning heavily against him as she hobbled toward the house. The door swung open as they approached, revealing an older man with silver-streaked hair and kind eyes. "Mr. Porter, we were getting worried." He broke off, noticing Bethany. "What happened?" "Frank, this is Miss Bethany Fletcher. She was trapped in the old Simmons barn when it collapsed during the storm. Miss Fletcher, my foreman, Frank Miller." "Pleasure, madam," Frank said, tipping his hat. "Though I wish it were under better circumstances." "The blue room upstairs is ready," Ryan directed. "Could you ask Mrs. Winters to prepare a hot bath and find some clean clothes? And we'll need her salve for bruising." "Right away," Frank replied, disappearing down a hallway. Ryan helped Bethany to a comfortable chair in the sitting room. The interior of the house surprised her. It was tastefully furnished with solid wooden pieces and colorful woven rugs. Bookshelves lined one wall, filled to capacity. Not at all the bachelor quarters she'd expected. "This was my parents' home," Ryan explained, noticing her curious gaze. "They passed 3 years ago, within months of each other. Influenza." "I'm sorry," Bethany said softly. "My parents died 4 years ago. Wagon accident." Their eyes met in silent understanding, the particular kind of loneliness that comes from being the one left behind. A flurry of activity broke the moment as a plump, gray-haired woman bustled into the room, wiping her hands on her apron. "Oh, you poor dear. I'm Mrs. Winters, the housekeeper. Let's get you cleaned up and comfortable." Between Ryan and Mrs. Winters, Bethany was helped upstairs to a cheerful bedroom with a large feather bed and curtained windows overlooking the property. A copper bathtub steamed invitingly behind a screen in the corner. "I'll leave you in Mrs. Winters' capable hands," Ryan said from the doorway. "Rest well, Miss Fletcher. We'll talk more in the morning." As the door closed behind him, Bethany found herself watching the empty space where he'd stood, wondering at the strange sense of loss she felt at his departure. Mrs. Winters clucked sympathetically as she helped Bethany undress, revealing the full extent of her injuries. An angry purple bruise spread across her calf and thigh, and numerous scrapes and smaller bruises mottled her arms and torso. "You're lucky to be alive, Miss Fletcher," the housekeeper remarked, echoing Ryan's earlier assessment as she helped Bethany into the bath. "So I've been told," Bethany replied, wincing as the hot water stung her abrasions. "Though I suspect luck had less to do with it than Mr. Porter's timely arrival." Mrs. Winters smiled knowingly. "He's a good man, our Mr. Porter. Too good to be alone as he is." "He isn't married?" The question slipped out before Bethany could stop it. "No, dear." There have been interested parties. Of course, he's the most eligible bachelor in the county with this ranch and those looks. But he's particular. The older woman's eyes twinkled. Says he's waiting for someone who makes him feel like he's found something he didn't know he was missing. Bethany absorbed this information silently as Mrs. Winters helped her wash her long auburn hair. By the time she was dried, dressed in a borrowed nightgown, and settled into bed with her leg properly salved and bandaged, exhaustion overwhelmed her. She barely registered the housekeeper's departure before sleep claimed her completely. Morning arrived with golden sunlight streaming through the curtains and the tantalizing aroma of coffee and bacon wafting upstairs. Bethany awakened slowly, momentarily disoriented by the unfamiliar surroundings before the previous day's events came rushing back. Testing her injured leg cautiously, she found the pain had subsided to a dull ache. A soft knock at the door preceded Mrs. Winters' entrance with a breakfast tray. "Good morning, dear. How are you feeling?" "Much improved, thank you," Bethany replied truthfully, accepting the tray. "Is Mr. Porter about? I'd like to thank him properly." "He's been up since dawn, checking the herd," Mrs. Winters explained, opening the curtains wider. "But he left these for you." She gestured to a stack of books on the bedside table that Bethany hadn't noticed. Touched by the thoughtful gesture, Bethany examined the volumes, a collection of poetry, a novel she'd heard of but never read, and a history of Wyoming territory. A folded note sat atop the stack. "Miss Fletcher," it read in a surprisingly elegant hand. "I thought you might appreciate some company while you recover. These are among my favorites. Rest today. We'll speak when I return this evening. R.P." "He's always been a great reader," Mrs. Winters commented, laying out a simple but pretty dress across the foot of the bed. Said his mother taught him the value of books early on. Bethany spent the day alternating between reading and resting, with occasional assistance from Mrs. Winters to walk short distances to strengthen her leg. By late afternoon, she felt steady enough to venture downstairs, where she discovered a cozy study adjacent to the sitting room. Bookshelves climbed to the ceiling, and a large desk positioned near the window overlooked the property. Unable to resist exploring, she traced her fingers along the book spines, noting the diverse collection, scientific treatises alongside poetry, historical accounts beside novels. This was the library of a curious mind with wide-ranging interests. "Find anything interesting?" Bethany started at Ryan's voice, turning to find him leaning against the doorframe. He'd clearly just returned. His dark hair was windblown, and his face was bronzed from hours in the sun. Yet he'd taken time to wash up and change into clean clothes before seeking her out. "Everything," she answered honestly. "You have more books than the lending library in Boston." A pleased smile lit his face. "My mother was a schoolteacher before she married my father. She brought her love of learning west with her." He stepped into the room, closing the distance between them. "How's the leg today?" "Much better. Your Mrs. Winters is quite the healer. She'll be pleased to hear it." Ryan studied her for a moment. "You look better with some color in your cheeks. You had me worried yesterday." The genuine concern in his voice warmed something inside her. "Thank you for the books, and for everything else. You're welcome to stay as long as you need," he said, gesturing for her to join him in the sitting room. "Which reminds me we should discuss your plans. You mentioned traveling companions?" Bethany lowered herself carefully onto the sofa, arranging her skirts. "Former companions," she corrected, bitterness edging her voice. "We met in Cheyenne. I was looking for work as a teacher, and they claimed to be heading to a settlement near Green River that needed one." Ryan sat opposite her, his expression darkening. "And they abandoned you at the first sign of trouble?" "Yes," she sighed, twisting her hands in her lap. "I've been on my own since my parents died, moving from position to position. I was hoping to find something more permanent in the West." "As it happens," Ryan said slowly, "Sweetwater needs a teacher. The settlement's grown enough that the families are pooling resources to build a proper schoolhouse. They've been searching for someone qualified." Hope flared in Bethany's chest. "Are you serious?" "Completely. The town's only 7 miles from here." He hesitated, then added, "I'm on the town council. I could speak for you, if you'd like." "That would be—" She struggled to find adequate words. "I would be eternally grateful." The smile that spread across his face made her heart skip oddly. Consider it done. In the meantime, you're welcome here for as long as it takes your leg to heal properly." Over the next 2 weeks, Bethany's life fell into a new and unexpectedly pleasant rhythm. Each morning, she'd breakfast with Ryan before he headed out to work the ranch, then spend her hours reading, helping Mrs. Winters with light household tasks, and gradually increasing her walks around the property as her strength returned. In the evenings, Ryan would join her for dinner, and they'd talk for hours afterward. She learned about his childhood on the ranch, his brief time at university back east, and his return home when his father's health began to fail. He listened intently to her stories of Boston, her teaching experiences, and her dreams of establishing a school where children could explore ideas beyond basic reading and arithmetic. On a particularly fine Sunday afternoon, Ryan suggested a short ride to show her the surrounding area. Though initially hesitant to mount a horse again, Bethany found herself unable to resist the adventure, or perhaps the company. Ryan selected a gentle mare for her and helped her mount, his hands lingering at her waist a moment longer than strictly necessary. The awareness that flickered between them wasn't new, but it seemed to grow stronger with each passing day. They rode at a leisurely pace, cresting a hill that overlooked the entire valley. The landscape stretched before them, rolling grasslands dotted with wildflowers, the distant mountains rising blue against the horizon, and below, the neat buildings of Ryan's ranch. "It's breathtaking," Bethany said, genuinely awed by the vista. "This is my favorite spot on the entire property," Ryan admitted, dismounting and helping her down. They stood side by side, looking out over the land. "My father brought me here when I was 10 years old and told me that someday it would all be my responsibility." "Were you frightened by the prospect?" "Terrified," he laughed, "but also proud that he trusted me with it." He turned to her, his expression suddenly serious. "I rode out here the day after I found you, Bethany." It was the first time he'd used her given name, and the intimacy of it sent a shiver through her that had nothing to do with the breeze. "I kept thinking about what might have happened if I hadn't decided to check that fence line that day." His voice dropped lower. "If I hadn't heard you calling—" "But you did," she said softly, finding the courage to reach for his hand. "You found me." His fingers intertwined with hers, warm and steady. "I think perhaps it was the other way around." The moment stretched between them, fragile and charged with possibility. Bethany could scarcely breathe as Ryan's gaze dropped to her lips, his intention clear in the subtle shift of his body toward hers. The whinny of his horse broke the spell, causing them both to step back. The moment passed, but something had fundamentally changed between them, a line crossed that could not be uncrossed. On the ride back to the ranch, Bethany found herself acutely aware of Ryan's presence behind her as he led her mare. Every casual comment, every shared observation seemed weighted with new meaning. By the time they returned, the sun was setting, painting the sky in spectacular oranges and pinks. "I think I'm ready to visit the town tomorrow," Bethany announced over dinner that evening. "If your offer to introduce me to the council still stands." Something flickered in Ryan's eyes. Disappointment, perhaps, that she was thinking of leaving, but he nodded. "Of course. We can ride in after breakfast." Sweetwater proved to be larger than Bethany had expected, a proper town with a main street lined with businesses, a church whose steeple dominated the skyline, and neat houses radiating outward. People nodded respectfully to Ryan as he escorted her down the street, several calling greetings. "You're well regarded here," she observed. "My family helped establish this town," he explained. "My grandfather was among the first settlers." The makeshift schoolhouse was currently a converted storefront, but Ryan showed her the plot where construction would begin on a proper building within the month. Inside, a dozen desks were arranged in rows, with a larger desk at the front for the teacher. "It's not much yet," Ryan admitted, "but with the right person guiding it." "It's perfect," Bethany breathed, already envisioning how she would arrange things, what books she would request. The town council meeting was held that afternoon in the back room of the general store. Bethany waited nervously while Ryan presented her credentials to the 5 other members: the town mayor, the minister, the doctor, and 2 prominent ranchers. "Miss Fletcher comes highly recommended," he concluded. "She's taught in Boston and several settlements between here and there. I believe she's exactly who we've been looking for. Mayor Thornton, a portly man with impressive whiskers, cleared his throat. While we appreciate your endorsement, Ryan, this is a significant decision for our community. Miss Fletcher, would you mind answering a few questions? For the next half hour, Bethany outlined her teaching philosophy, described her experience with different age groups, and explained how she would structure lessons for a school with children of varying ages and abilities. As she spoke, she felt increasingly confident this was her element, the work she was born to do. When the questioning concluded, Mayor Thornton exchanged glances with the other council members before addressing her directly. Miss Fletcher, I believe I speak for all of us when I say you appear eminently qualified for the position. Would you be willing to begin as soon as the new schoolhouse is completed? That should be approximately 6 weeks from now. Joy bubbled up inside her. I would be honored, sir. Excellent, the mayor beamed. We can offer you a salary of $40 per month, plus lodging in the rooms above the schoolhouse. Does that arrangement suit you? It does, thank you. Bethany could scarcely believe her good fortune. As they left the meeting, Ryan's smile matched her own. Congratulations, teacher, he said, his eyes crinkling at the corners. I knew they'd recognize your value immediately. I can't thank you enough for your support, she replied earnestly. You earned this on your own merit, he insisted. Now, I believe this calls for a celebration. The hotel restaurant serves the best apple pie in the territory. Over pie and coffee, they discussed plans for the school. Ryan offered to help acquire books and supplies from Cheyenne, and suggested local families who might donate furniture or labor for the building's completion. As they talked, Bethany noticed a pretty young woman at a nearby table watching them with evident interest. When the woman approached, Ryan stood politely. Ryan Porter, as I live and breathe, the woman exclaimed. Where have you been hiding yourself? You haven't been to a social in months. Miss Amelia Davis, this is Miss Bethany Fletcher, our new school teacher, Ryan introduced them. Bethany, Miss Davis is the daughter of one of our local merchants. Charmed, Amelia said, though her smile didn't quite reach her eyes. A school teacher? How dedicated of you. Will you be staying with the Porters until suitable accommodations are arranged? The implication in her tone was unmistakable, and Bethany felt her cheeks warm. Only temporarily, while I recover from an injury, she clarified. Miss Fletcher was caught in the collapse of the old Simmons barn during the recent storm, Ryan explained, his voice cooling noticeably. She's been convalescing at my ranch. How fortunate that Ryan found you, Amelia remarked, her gaze calculating as it moved between them. He's always had a talent for rescue. If you'll excuse us, Miss Davis, Ryan said firmly, placing money on the table. We should be heading back before dark. As they walked to their horses, Bethany couldn't help asking, Is she someone special to you? Ryan's laugh was short and humorless. Amelia Davis has been attempting to secure a marriage proposal from me for the past 2 years. Her father wants to combine our properties, and she wants the Porter name. And you don't want either of those things? Bethany kept her tone light, though her heart beat faster awaiting his answer. Ryan stopped, turning to face her directly. No, he said simply. I don't. The ride back to the ranch passed in comfortable silence, each lost in their own thoughts. When they arrived, Ryan helped her dismount, his hands lingering at her waist. Thank you for today, Bethany said, reluctant to move away from his touch. There's something I need to tell you, he replied, his expression serious. Something I should have mentioned earlier. Concern flickered through her. What is it? The living quarters above the schoolhouse. They won't be ready when the school opens. Construction on that portion has been delayed. He hesitated. The council was going to arrange temporary boarding with one of the town families, but I took the liberty of suggesting an alternative. Oh? Bethany held her breath. I suggested you might continue staying at my ranch. It's not an unreasonable distance to travel each day, and there's plenty of room. His eyes searched hers. But I realize now that I should have consulted you first. After what Miss Davis implied, understanding dawned. You're worried about my reputation. Your reputation, your comfort, your preferences, he acknowledged. If you'd rather make other arrangements, I'll completely understand. Bethany considered the situation. Propriety was important, especially for a school teacher in a small community. But the thought of leaving Ryan's home, leaving his company, filled her with unexpected sadness. "Mrs. Winters lives in the house," she reasoned aloud. "And there's Frank as well. I don't think anyone could reasonably object to the arrangement on grounds of propriety." Relief visibly washed over Ryan's features. "You're certain?" "I am," Bethany confirmed, surprising herself with how true it was. "Though I insist on contributing something for my room and board once I begin receiving my salary." "We can discuss terms later," Ryan conceded, offering his arm to escort her inside. "For now, let's tell Mrs. Winters the good news. She's grown quite fond of having another woman in the house." As days turned to weeks, Bethany fell into an easy rhythm at the Porter Ranch. Her leg healed completely, allowing her to take longer walks around the property. She discovered a small creek bordered by cottonwoods, the perfect spot for reading on warm afternoons, and became familiar with the ranch's operations, occasionally helping Mrs. Winters deliver lunch to the men working the fields. Ryan began inviting her to accompany him on his evening rides to check the herds, teaching her about cattle ranching and the unique challenges of Wyoming territory. He seemed genuinely interested in her opinions, whether discussing books or business decisions, and shared his own thoughts with a candor she found refreshing after years of formal interactions in Boston society. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching a spectacular sunset paint the sky, Ryan broke their comfortable silence. "Tell me about your dream school," he said. "If you could create any educational environment you wanted, what would it look like?" The question delighted her. "It would be full of light," she began, the vision clear in her mind. "Windows that let in the sunshine, and enough lamps for dark days. Books, of course not just primers, but literature and science and history. Maps on the walls so children could see the world beyond Wyoming." She warmed to her subject, describing learning gardens where students could grow plants and understand natural sciences firsthand, and how she believed in teaching practical skills alongside academic subjects. Boys and girls would learn arithmetic and literature, but also how to manage a household budget and write a proper business letter, she explained. "I want to prepare them for real life, not just examinations." Ryan watched her with evident admiration. "You're extraordinary, Bethany Fletcher." The compliment caught her off guard. "I'm just passionate about education." "It's more than that," he shifted to face her directly. "You see possibilities where others see limitations. You understand that learning happens everywhere, not just between the covers of a book." Their eyes met in the fading light, and Bethany felt the now familiar flutter in her chest. Ryan reached out slowly, as if giving her time to withdraw, and tucked a stray lock of hair behind her ear. His fingers lingered against her cheek. "I'm very glad that barn collapsed," he said softly. "That's a terrible thing to say," she replied, though a smile tugged at her lips. "Perhaps," he conceded. "But if it hadn't, our paths might never have crossed." The air between them seemed charged with unspoken words. Ryan's gaze dropped to her lips, and this time there was no interruption, no reason to pull away. He leaned forward, hesitating just a breath away from her. "May I?" he whispered. In answer, Bethany closed the distance between them. His lips were warm and gentle against hers, the kiss tender and questioning at first, then deepening as she responded. His hand cradled her face with exquisite care, as though she were something precious and rare. When they finally parted, Bethany felt dizzy with emotions she couldn't fully name. "I've wanted to do that since the moment you looked up at me from beneath those barn beams," Ryan admitted, his voice husky. "Even covered in dirt and half crushed?" she teased, trying to steady her racing heart. "Even then." His smile was tender. "Especially then? You were the bravest woman I'd ever seen." The schoolhouse's completion took longer than anticipated, plagued by delayed lumber shipments and early autumn rains that hampered construction. By the time it was ready in late October, Bethany had been living at the Porter Ranch for nearly 3 months. The night before classes were to begin, she found herself unable to sleep, excitement and nervousness keeping her mind racing. Giving up on rest, she donned her robe and slippers and made her way downstairs, intending to make a cup of tea. She was surprised to find light spilling from beneath the study door. Knocking softly, she heard Ryan's voice bid her enter. He sat at his desk, several ledgers open before him, but he rose immediately when she appeared. "Bethany, is everything all right?" Just pre-teaching jitters, she explained. I didn't mean to disturb your work. You're not disturbing anything, he assured her, clearing a stack of papers from a chair. Join me? I could use a break from these figures. She settled into the offered seat, noticing the strain around his eyes. Is something wrong with the accounts? Ryan sighed, running a hand through his already disheveled hair. Nothing serious. The cattle prices aren't as strong as I'd hoped this season, and I've had some unexpected expenses with the new well and repairing fences after the storms. We'll weather it. I should be contributing more, Bethany said, conscience pricking her. Now that I'll be earning a salary. Absolutely not, Ryan interrupted firmly. The Porter Ranch is doing fine, Bethany. These are normal fluctuations in any business. She studied him for a moment, then changed tactics. Then, why are you poring over ledgers at midnight? A rueful smile crossed his face. Caught. Truth is, I'm trying to distract myself. From what? He hesitated, then admitted quietly, from thinking about how empty this house will feel once you're living above the schoolhouse. The confession hung in the air between them, honest and vulnerable. Bethany felt her heart expand with tenderness for this man who had rescued her in more ways than one. Ryan, she began carefully, in these past months, I've come to care for you deeply. And I for you, he replied, his eyes never leaving hers. More than I thought possible. But we've known each other such a short time, she continued, voicing the doubt that occasionally nagged at her. And our circumstances are unusual. Meeting the way we did, my dependence on your generosity. You think your feelings might be gratitude rather than something more? Ryan suggested gently. No, Bethany answered immediately, surprising herself with her certainty. No, what I feel for you goes far beyond gratitude. But I wonder if we need more time, more normal circumstances, to be sure. Ryan nodded slowly, considering her words. That's wise, he acknowledged. And I want you to be absolutely certain, Bethany. About me, about us. He took her hand, his thumb tracing circles on her palm. So, we'll take our time. You'll start your teaching position, establish yourself in the community. I'll court you properly if you'll allow it. Court me? The word sent a pleasant thrill through her. Yes, he affirmed, bringing her hand to his lips. With all the traditional observances, escorting you to church socials, bringing you flowers, seeking your company for Sunday drives. If that's what you want. The image of such conventional courtship after their decidedly unconventional beginning made Bethany smile. I think I'd like that very much. The following weeks brought significant changes to Bethany's life. Teaching consumed her days as she worked with 27 students ranging in age from 6 to 16. The challenges were considerable limited resources, varying levels of prior education, and the need to establish her authority while winning the children's trust. But she thrived on the work, returning to the ranch each evening tired but fulfilled. Ryan had arranged for Frank to drive her to and from town in the wagon each day, insisting it was more practical than her riding alone, particularly as winter approached. Their courtship proceeded exactly as Ryan had promised. He accompanied her to church each Sunday, where they endured knowing smiles from the townspeople. He sent flowers to the schoolhouse, much to the delight of her female students who sighed romantically over the gesture. On weekends, they took drives to neighboring communities or picnicked by the creek when weather permitted. Amelia Davis and several other young women watched these developments with poorly concealed displeasure. But Bethany found she cared little for their opinions. What mattered was the growing certainty in her heart that what she felt for Ryan Porter was genuine and lasting. The first snow fell in early December, transforming the landscape into a glittering wonderland. Bethany stood at her classroom window after dismissing the students, watching the flakes swirl in the gathering dusk. The sound of boots stomping snow from the porch alerted her to a visitor. Ready to head home? Ryan asked from the doorway, his tall frame filling the space. Surprise and pleasure flooded through her. I thought Frank was coming with the wagon. Change of plans. Frank's helping with a difficult calving. He crossed to her desk, leaving a trail of melting snow in his wake. Besides, I wanted to see you. The simple admission warmed her more effectively than the schoolroom stove. Let me gather my things. As they rode back to the ranch, sharing Ryan's horse with Bethany seated before him in the saddle, snowflakes caught in her eyelashes and dusted her hair. Ryan's arms encircled her, holding the reins, but also keeping her secure against his chest. "You smell like chalk dust and apples," he murmured against her ear. "An occupational hazard," she laughed. "The children brought apples as gifts today." "They adore you," Ryan said. The Harper boy told his father, "You're the smartest person in Wyoming territory." "High praise indeed," Bethany replied, leaning back against him, though possibly exaggerated. They crested the hill overlooking the ranch, now blanketed in pristine white. Smoke curled invitingly from the chimney, and lamplight glowed in the windows. The sight filled Bethany with an overwhelming sense of homecoming. "It's beautiful," she breathed. Ryan reined the horse to a stop, allowing them to appreciate the view. "Bethany," he said, his voice suddenly serious, "I have something to ask you." She turned as much as the saddle would allow, meeting his gaze over her shoulder. "Yes? These past months, they've been the happiest of my life." His arms tightened slightly around her. "I know we agreed to take our time, to court properly, but I find myself unwilling to wait any longer to tell you what's in my heart." Bethany's pulse quickened, though she remained silent, letting him continue. "I love you," he said simply. "I think I began falling in love with you the moment I heard your voice calling from beneath those barn timbers. Every day since has only deepened that feeling." Snowflakes melted on her cheeks, indistinguishable from the tears that had begun to fall. "Ryan, you don't need to answer now," he hastened to add. "I just wanted you to know the truth of my feelings." "Ryan Porter," Bethany said, her voice steady despite her tears. "I have known for weeks that I love you. I was simply waiting for the right moment to tell you." The joy that transformed his face was breathtaking. Without another word, he urged the horse forward, clearly eager to reach the privacy of home. Once there, he dismounted quickly and reached up to help her down, but instead of setting her on her feet, he kept her in his arms. "Say it again," he requested, snowflakes catching in his dark lashes. "I love you, Ryan Porter," Bethany repeated, cradling his face between her gloved hands. "With all my heart." His kiss was different this time, confident and passionate, filled with promise. When they finally parted, both breathless, Ryan pressed his forehead to hers. "Marry me," he whispered. "Be my wife, my partner, the mother of my children. Share this life with me." "Yes," she answered without hesitation. "Yes to all of it." The news of their engagement spread through Sweetwater like wildfire. Most reactions were positive. The respected rancher and the beloved new teacher made a natural match in the community's eyes. Even Amelia Davis eventually offered stiff congratulations when they announced their intent to marry in the spring. "April," Ryan had suggested, "1 year from when we met." "That seems fitting," Bethany agreed, already envisioning a simple ceremony in the church followed by a celebration at the ranch. The winter months passed in a flurry of preparations both for the wedding and for their future life together. Ryan insisted that Bethany consider the ranch house her home in truth, encouraging her to make whatever changes she desired to the decor. "My mother would have loved you," he told her one evening, as they discussed replacing the faded curtains in the sitting room. "She always said this place needed a woman's touch." "I wish I could have known your parents," Bethany replied softly. "They would have adored you." Ryan took her hand, kissing her palm in a gesture that had become familiar and precious. "Almost as much as I do." January brought a severe blizzard that closed the school for a week. Trapped inside by towering snowdrifts, Bethany and Ryan spent their days planning for the future, discussing improvements to both the ranch and the school, dreaming of the family they hoped to create together. On a particularly cold night, as they sat before the fireplace after dinner, Ryan reached into his pocket and withdrew a small velvet box. "I've been waiting for the right moment," he explained, suddenly appearing nervous. "This belonged to my grandmother and then my mother. I'd be honored if you would wear it." He opened the box to reveal a delicate gold ring, set with a single pearl surrounded by tiny diamonds. Bethany gasped at its simple elegance. "It's beautiful," she whispered as he slipped it onto her finger. "I'll treasure it always." February brought Ryan's 31st birthday. which Bethany celebrated by preparing his favorite meal with Mrs. Winter's guidance and presenting him with a hand-knitted scarf in rich blue wool that matched his eyes. "You've been practicing," he observed, fingering the even stitches with appreciation. "Mrs. Winters is a patient teacher," Bethany laughed. "Though I'm afraid my first attempts resembled something a cat might produce after playing with yarn." As winter gave way to spring, wedding preparations intensified. Bethany ordered fabric from Cheyenne for a new dress, and the women of the church offered to help with the sewing. Ryan expanded the garden behind the house, explaining that he wanted to provide fresh vegetables and flowers for his new bride. In late March, just 2 weeks before the wedding, disaster struck unexpectedly. Bethany was teaching her afternoon geography lesson when Mayor Thornton burst into the schoolroom, his face grave. "Miss Fletcher," he said, heedless of the curious students, "you need to come immediately. There's been an accident at the Porter Ranch." The world seemed to stop. "What kind of accident?" she demanded, already reaching for her coat. "A fire in the south pasture spread to the barn. Ryan was trying to get the horses out when part of the roof collapsed." The terrible symmetry of it, another barn collapse, another person trapped, was not lost on Bethany as she raced toward the wagon waiting outside. "Is he—" She couldn't complete the question. "He's alive," the mayor assured her. "Dr. Mitchell is with him now. Frank sent for you right away." The journey to the ranch seemed interminable. When they finally arrived, smoke still rose from the charred remains of the barn, though the fire itself had been extinguished. Ranch hands moved about with solemn faces, leading nervous horses to temporary corrals. Mrs. Winters met Bethany at the door, her normally composed face streaked with tears. "He's upstairs, dear. The doctor's still with him." Bethany took the stairs 2 at a time, her heart pounding. She found Ryan in their bedroom, lying still against the pillows, while Dr. Mitchell bandaged a wound on his forearm. His face was smudged with soot, and a nasty gash crossed his forehead, but his eyes were open. "Bethany!" he breathed, reaching for her with his uninjured arm. She was at his side in an instant, careful not to interfere with the doctor's work. "What happened?" "Brush fire got out of control," Ryan explained, wincing as the doctor tightened the bandage. "Wind shifted suddenly. By the time we noticed, the barn roof was ablaze. Had to get the horses out." "He was bringing out the last one when a burning beam fell," Dr. Mitchell added, his tone professionally detached. "Fortunately, Frank pulled him clear before the rest came down." Bethany remembered all too well the terror of being trapped beneath collapsing timbers. That Ryan had experienced the same nightmare filled her with anguish. "How badly is he hurt?" she asked the doctor directly. "Burns on his right arm, none severe. Laceration on the forehead that required stitches, bruised ribs, and likely a mild concussion from the beam that struck him." "Doctor," Mitchell packed his instruments into his bag. "He needs rest, but there appears to be no lasting damage. He's extraordinarily lucky." When the doctor departed, Bethany sat carefully on the edge of the bed, taking Ryan's uninjured hand between both of hers. "You frightened me half to death," she admonished gently. "I'm sorry," he replied, his voice hoarse from smoke. "Couldn't leave the animals to burn." "I know." She brushed his hair back from the bandage wound. "Just as you couldn't leave me in that collapsed barn. It's who you are." A ghost of his usual smile crossed his face. "Remember what I told you that day? That I'd never leave you?" "I remember every word," Bethany assured him. "I meant it then, and I mean it now." His eyes, though pained, were steady on hers. "I'll always come back to you, Bethany. Always." The wedding proceeded as planned, though with some adjustments. Ryan's bandages were hidden beneath his best suit, and he walked with a slight limp from his bruised hip. But his smile as Bethany walked down the church aisle toward him showed no trace of discomfort, only pure, undisguised joy. The ceremony was brief, but deeply moving. When Ryan repeated his vows to love, honor, and cherish Bethany for all the days of his life, his voice rang with conviction that brought tears to her eyes. As they exchanged rings, his hands were steady around hers, the physical connection mirroring the emotional bond that had grown between them over the past year. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," the minister declared to the assembled congregation. "What God has joined together, let no man put asunder." Ryan's kiss was tender but thorough, heedless of the chuckles and applause from their guests. When they finally parted, Bethany saw in his eyes the same wonder. She felt that somehow, against all odds, they had found each other and created something precious and lasting. The celebration at the ranch afterward was joyous, with tables set up in the yard beneath flowering trees. Children played games organized by Bethany's older students, while adults enjoyed the feast prepared by Mrs. Winters and the town's women. As dusk fell, lanterns were lit, casting a warm glow over the festivities. "Happy, Mrs. Porter," Ryan murmured as they shared their first dance as husband and wife. The name her new name sent a thrill through Bethany. "Completely," she confirmed, resting her head against his shoulder. "And you? More than I ever thought possible." His arm tightened around her waist. "Thank you for saying yes." "Thank you for digging me out of that barn," she replied with a soft laugh. Later, after the guests had departed and the household had settled into silence, they stood together on the porch, looking out at the stars scattered across the Wyoming sky. Ryan's arms encircled Bethany from behind, holding her against his chest. "What are you thinking?" he asked, pressing a kiss to her temple. "That I never expected my life to take this turn," she admitted. "When my parents died, I thought I'd always be alone, moving from place to place, never really belonging anywhere. And now," she turned in his embrace to face him, "now I know that home isn't a place, it's a person. It's you, Ryan." His kiss was both an affirmation and a promise of love, freely given and joyfully received, of a future built on the foundation of mutual respect and understanding they had established in their unconventional beginning. 5 years later. The sound of children's laughter floated through the open window of the schoolroom as Bethany collected papers from her students' desks. The final bell had rung 15 minutes earlier, releasing 24 excited youngsters into the warm June afternoon. At 28, Bethany Porter had established herself as one of the most respected educators in the county. Under her guidance, the Sweetwater School had flourished, expanding its curriculum and resources year by year. She still taught all grades, but now had an assistant to help with the youngest children 3 days a week. Gathering the last of her materials, Bethany glanced at the clock. Ryan would be arriving soon to accompany her home. Though she could easily make the journey alone, this end-of-day ritual had become precious to them both, a quiet moment together before rejoining the busy household at the ranch. The sound of boots on the wooden steps announced his arrival right on schedule. Bethany smiled to herself, appreciating his consistency after all these years. "Ready to go, teacher?" Ryan asked from the doorway, his tall frame silhouetted against the afternoon sun. At 36, he was more handsome than ever, the slight silver threading his dark hair at the temples, only adding to his distinguished appearance. "Almost," she replied, securing the last of her papers in her satchel. "Just need to leave these spelling tests for Miss Wilson to review tomorrow." Ryan crossed the room to help her with her shawl, his movements still possessing the same careful tenderness that had marked his care for her after the barn collapse. 5 years of marriage had deepened their connection rather than diminishing it, each challenge and joy shared between them, strengthening the bond. "How was your day?" Bethany asked as they walked toward the waiting buggy, her hand tucked comfortably in the crook of his elbow. "Productive," Ryan replied. "The new irrigation system is working well for the eastern fields, and Frank reports the calving is nearly complete with minimal losses." They settled into the buggy, the routine familiar and comfortable. As they drove through town, several people called greetings, which they returned cheerfully. Sweetwater had grown considerably in 5 years, with new businesses and homes expanding the community's boundaries. "Mrs. Wilson asked if you'd be willing to judge the quilting competition at the Independence Day celebration," Bethany mentioned as they left the town behind. Ryan groaned good-naturedly. "What do I know about quilting?" "Nothing whatsoever," she laughed. "But you're still the most respected rancher in the county, so your opinion carries weight regardless of the subject." "Tell her I'll do it if you'll help me distinguish between a proper stitch and whatever the alternative might be," he bargained. Their easy conversation continued as they approached the ranch, which had also seen significant improvements over the years. The rebuilt barn was larger and more modern than its predecessor, housing an expanded herd of horses alongside the necessary equipment for the cattle operation. New outbuildings served specialized purposes. and the main house had been expanded to include a dedicated library that housed their growing collection of books. As they rounded the final bend in the road, the house came into view, and with it, the small figure waiting impatiently on the porch steps. "Mama, Papa." 3-year-old Emma Porter flew down the steps the moment the buggy appeared, her dark curls bouncing with each eager step. She was the perfect blend of her parents, Ryan's blue eyes, and Bethany's auburn hair, a quick mind paired with a gentle spirit. Ryan pulled the buggy to a stop and jumped down, scooping his daughter into his arms before helping Bethany descend. "Have you been good for Mrs. Winters today, little one?" "Very good," Emma assured him solemnly. "I helped with cookies and didn't eat any batter, even though it smelled delicious." "Such restraint," Bethany remarked, pressing a kiss to her daughter's cheek. "I'm impressed." "Mrs. Winters said the baby might come any day now," Emma informed them, her expression serious. "I told her babies take their time and come when they're ready, just like you told me, Mama." Bethany exchanged an amused glance with Ryan over their daughter's head. At nearly 8 months pregnant with their second child, Bethany had spent considerable time explaining the impending arrival to Emma, who alternated between excitement and concern about sharing her parents' attention. "That's exactly right," Ryan confirmed, setting Emma down but keeping hold of her hand. "And speaking of Mrs. Winters, let's go find her and see about those cookies you helped make." The interior of the house was cool and inviting after the warmth of the June afternoon. Mrs. Winters greeted them from the kitchen doorway, her face flushed from the heat of the stove, but wearing her customary smile. "Perfect timing," she declared. "Dinner will be ready in 20 minutes, and those cookies are cool enough to eat now." Later, after Emma had been tucked into bed with stories and kisses, Bethany and Ryan retired to the porch swing that had become their favorite spot for evening conversations. The Wyoming twilight stretched long and golden across the land, painting the familiar landscape in warm hues. "I received a letter from the Territorial Education Office today," Bethany mentioned, nestled comfortably against Ryan's side despite her expanded midsection. "They're considering my proposal for a regional teacher training program." Pride shone in Ryan's eyes as he covered her hand with his own. "Of course they are. It's an excellent plan, and you're the perfect person to implement it." "It would mean more responsibilities," she cautioned, "more travel, eventually." "We'll manage," he assured her. "You've supported my ranch expansion every step of the way. This is equally important." The baby shifted beneath her ribs, prompting Bethany to adjust her position. Ryan's hand moved to rest on the swell of her abdomen, his expression softening as he felt the movement beneath his palm. "Active tonight," he observed. "Always is at this hour," Bethany replied, covering his hand with hers. "I think we have another night owl like Emma." They sat in comfortable silence for a few minutes, watching the first stars appear in the deepening blue of the evening sky. The distant lowing of cattle and the soft nickering of horses in the barn provided a familiar soundtrack to their contemplation. "Do you ever think about that day?" Bethany asked suddenly. "The day we met?" "Often," Ryan admitted, "especially when there's a storm brewing. I still get an urge to check all the structures in the area, just in case." Bethany smiled at this evidence of his protective nature unchanged after all these years. "I was terrified," she remembered, "convinced I would die there, alone and forgotten. And then I heard your voice." "And I heard yours," Ryan replied, his arm tightening around her shoulders. "The strongest, most determined voice I'd ever heard, even muffled by all that debris." "You said you'd never leave me," Bethany recalled softly. "Right there in the dirt and dust, with my leg throbbing and my pride in shambles. And you meant it." "Best promise I ever made," Ryan said, turning to meet her gaze directly. "And the easiest to keep." In the gentle Wyoming twilight, with their child sleeping peacefully upstairs and another stirring beneath Bethany's heart, the journey from that collapsed barn to this moment of perfect contentment seemed both miraculous and inevitable, a path meant specifically for them to travel together. "I love you, Ryan Porter," Bethany said, the words as true now as the first time she'd spoken them in the falling snow years before. "And I love you, Bethany Porter," he replied, bending to kiss her with the same tenderness that had marked their very first embrace. "Today and all our tomorrows." As darkness settled fully over the Porter ranch, they remained on the porch swing, talking softly of plans and dreams, secure in the knowledge that whatever challenges tomorrow might bring, they would face them as they had faced everything since that fateful day together, with courage and unwavering devotion. The barn that had collapsed around Bethany 5 years ago was long gone, its timbers repurposed or replaced. But the promise made amidst its ruins had built something far more enduring: a family, a legacy, a love strong enough to weather any storm the Wyoming territory could summon.